Okay, I'm on a roll, so we are here with chapter 23. Barbara finished serving again. Okay, recapping the last chapter. So, Hody's having thoughts about how she's never really gonna have a family. She might in the future, but right now she's like, she's just asking herself how to move on. From, it's not like their love ended, their love was still very much at their prime, and then Jerry died, and so she does not know how to not mourn her husband anymore and move on from him. And then seeing Richard with his children makes her have a weird sense because whenever she saw them, they were like Richard was always patrolling the kids, but now they were having fun. Like Richard looked like a stranger to her now. The way he was treating his kids. Spoiler alert: something is going on with Richard in Richard's life, which is making him do all these weird things. I'm just like too excited for that out. I don't know. I like Richard's redemption, but okay. So chapter 23. Barbara finished serving her customers as soon as they left the building. She ran into the staff room and lit up a cigarette. The travel agents had been so busy all day, and she had to work all through her lunch break. Melissa, her colleague, had called in sick that morning, though Barbara knew very well she had partied too hard that night before, and any sickness she might have was self inflicted. She she was stuck in this boring job all by herself today. And of course, it was the busiest day they'd had in ages. As soon as November came, with those horrible, depressing dark nights and dark mornings and piercing wind and sheets of rain, everyone came running in the door, booking holidays to beautiful, hot, sunny countries. Barbara shuddered as she heard the wind rattle the windows and made a note to herself to check for any special holiday. Her boss had finally gone out to run some errands, and she had flown into the staff room as quickly as she could to light up a cigarette. The bell over the door sounded, and Barbara cursed the customer entering the shop for disturbing her precious break. She puffed on the cigarette furiously, almost making herself dizzy, reapplied her glossy red lipstick, made sure her name badge was still pinned on, and sprayed her perfume all around the room so her boss wouldn't notice the smoke. She left the staff room expecting to see a customer sitting behind the counter, but instead the old man was still slowly making his way over. Barbara tried not to stare and began pressing random buttons on her keypad. "Excuse me," the man's weak voice called to her. "Hello, sir. How can I help you?" she said for the hundredth time that day. She didn't mean to be rude by staring at him, but she was surprised at how young the man actually was. From far away, his slumped figure looked like that of a pensioner. His body was hunched, and the walking stick in his hand seemed to be the only thing preventing him from collapsing to the floor in front of her. His skin was very white and pasty, as though he hadn't seen the sun for years, but he had big brown puppy eyes that seemed to smile at her from under his long lashes. She couldn't help but smile back at him. "I was hoping to book a holiday," he said quietly, "but I was wondering if you could help me choose a place." Usually Barbara would have silently screamed at the customer for making her do the unbelievably impossible task. Most of her customers were so fussy that she could be sitting there for hours with them flicking through brochures and trying to persuade them where to go, when the truth is she really couldn't give a toss where they went. But this man seemed pleasant, so she was glad to help. She surprised herself. "No problem, sir. Why don't you take a seat there and we'll search through the brochures?" She pointed to the chair in front of her and looked away again so she didn't have to watch her struggle to sit down. "Now," she said, full of smiles, "is there any country in particular that you would like to go?" Spain, Lanzarote, I think. Barbara was glad that this was going to be a lot easier than she thought. "And is it a summer holiday you're looking for?" He nodded slowly. They worked their way through the brochure, and the man finally found a place that he liked. Barbara was happy that he took her advice into account, unlike some of the other customers who just ignored every single bit of her knowledge. Okay, any month in particular? She said, looking at the prices. August? He asked, and those big brown eyes looked so deep into Barbara's soul, she just wanted to jump over the counter and give him a big hug. August is a good month, she agreed with him. Would you like a sea view or a pool view? The sea view is an extra 30 euros, she added quickly. He stared into the space with a smile on his face as though he was already there. A sea view, please. Good choice. Can I take your name and address, please? Oh, this is so sad. So sad. Because I've read this book before and no, I know where this is going. Oh, this isn't actually for me. It's a surprise for my wife and her friends. Those brown eyes looked sad. Barbara cleared her throat nervously. Well, that's very thoughtful of you. So she felt she had to add. Could I have their names then, please? She finished taking his details and he settled the bill. She began to print the arrangements from the computer to give to him. Oh, do you mind if I leave details here with you? I want to surprise my wife, and I would be afraid of leaving papers around the house in case she finds them. Barbara smiled. What a lucky wife you had. I won't be telling her till July, so do you think it could be kept quiet till then? That's no problem at all, sir. Usually the flight times aren't confirmed till a few weeks before anyway, so we would have no reason to call her. I'll give the other staff strict instructions not to call them. Thank you for your help, Barbara, he said, smiling sadly with those puppy eyes. It's been a pleasure, mister. It's Jerry. He smiled again. I told you it was sad. Well, it's been a pleasure, Jerry. I'm sure your wife will have a wonderful time. My friend went there last year and she loved it. Barbara felt the need to reassure him his wife would be fine. Well, I'd better head back home before they think I'd been kidnapped. I'm not even supposed to be out of bed, you know. He smiled again and a lump formed in Barbara's throat. She jumped to her feet and ran round the other side of the counter to hold the door open for him. He smiled appreciatively as he walked past her and she watched as he slowly climbed into the taxi that had been waiting outside for him. Just as Barbara was about to close the door, her boss walked in and it banged against his head. She looked over at Jerry, who was still waiting in the taxi to move out onto the road, and he laughed and gave her the thumbs up. Her boss threw her a look for leaving the counter unattended and marched into the staff room. Barbara, she yelled, have you been smoking in here again? She rolled her eyes and turned to face him. God, what's wrong with you? You look like you are about to burst into tears. What is up with this pub? It was the 1st of July, and Barbara sat grumpily behind the counter of Saul's travel agents. Every day she had worked this summer had been beautiful and sunny, but the last 2 days o- she'd had off it had pissed down with rain. Today was typically the complete opposite. It was the hottest day of the year. All her customers kept on bragging as they strolled in their little shorts and skimpy tops, filling the room with the smell of coconut sun. Barbara squirmed in her chair, in her uncomfortable and incredibly itchy uniform. She felt as if she was back at school again. She banged on the fan once again as it stalled. Oh, leave it, Barbara, Melissa moaned. That only make it worse. As if that could be possible, Barbara grumbled and spun around in her chair to face the computer where she pounded on the keypad. What is it with you today? Melissa asked. Oh, nothing much, Barbara said through gritted teeth. It's just a hottest day of the year, and we are stuck in this crappy job, this stuffy room with no air conditioning and these horrible itchy uniforms. She shouted each word towards her boss's office, hoping he would hear. That's all. Melissa sniggered. Look, why don't you go outside for a few minutes to get some air and I'll deal with the next customer, she said, nodding to the woman making her way in. Thanks, Mel, Barbara said, relieved at finally being able to escape. She grabbed her cigarettes. Right, I'm going to get some fresh air. Melissa looked down at her hand and rolled her eyes. Hello, heck, how can I help you? She smiled at the woman. Yes, I was wondering if Barbara still works here. Barbara froze as she was reaching the door and contemplated whether to run outside or to go back to work. She groaned and headed back to her seat. She looked at the woman behind the counter. She was pretty, she decided, but her eyes looked tired and drawn as she stared frantically from one girl to the other. Yes, I'm Barbara. Oh, good. The lady looked relieved, and she dived onto the stool in front of her. I was afraid you might not work here anymore. She wishes, Melissa muttered under her breath. Can I help you? Oh, God. I really hope you can, the lady said a bit hysterically and rooted through her bag. Barbara raised her eyebrows over at Melissa, and the two of them tried to hold in their laugh. Oh, she said eventually, pulling the crumpled envelope out of her bag. I received this today from my husband, and I was wondering if you could explain it to me. Barbara frowned as she stared at the dog-eared piece of paper on the counter. A page had been torn out of a holiday brochure, and written on it were words Swartz Travel Agent, attendee Barbara. I don't know what ATTN means though. Barbara frowned again and looked at the page more closely. My friend went there 2 years ago on holiday, but other than that, it means nothing to me. Did you get any more information? The lady shook her head vigorously. Well, can't you ask your husband for more information? Barbara was confused. No, he's not here anymore, she said sadly, and tears welled in her eyes. Barbara panicked. If her boss saw her making someone cry, she really would be given her marching orders. She was on her last warning, as it was. Okay, then can I take your name and maybe it will come up on the computer? It's Holly Kennedy. Her voice shook. Holly Kennedy. Holly Kennedy. Melissa was listening in on their conversation. That name rings a bell. Oh, hold on. I was about to call you this week. That's weird. I was under strict instructions by Barbara not to ring you until July for some reason. Oh, Barbara interrupted her friend, finally realizing what was going on here. You're Jerry's wife, she asked hopefully. Yes, Holly threw her hands to her face in shock. He wasn't here? Yes, he was. Barbara smiled encouragingly. He was a lovely man. He said, reaching out to Holly. She said, reaching out to Holly, to Holly's hand on the counter. Melissa stared at the two of them, not knowing what was going on. This is so great, like seeing all this conversation happening from like the third person's perspective rather than Holly's. It's so refreshing. It gives you like a take on what other people might see and think about their relationship. Of course, we are those people too who are looking into their relationship and are being like, oh, Jerry जैसा कोई मेरी जिंदगी में आए तो बात बन जाए kind of like thing. Moving on. That's cringy, but I am deeply cringe. So. Okay. Mm. Melissa stared at the two of them, not knowing what was going on. Barbara's heart went out to the lady across the counter. She was so young, and it must be so hard for her right now. But Barbara was delighted to be the bearer of good news. Melissa, can you get Cody some tissues, please? While I explained to her exactly why her husband was here, she beamed across the counter at Cody, then let go of Holly's hand to tap away at the computer, while Melissa returned with a box of tissues. Okay, Ruby, Barbara said softly. Jerry had arranged a trip, a holiday for you and Sharon McCarthy and Denise Hennessy to Lens to Lanzarote for 1 week, arriving on the 30th of July to return home on the 1st of August. Holly's hands flew to her face again in shock, and tears poured from her eyes. He was adamant that he found the perfect place for you, Barbara continued, delighted at her new role. She felt like one of those television hosts who sprang surprises on their guests. See, she hated her job, and people just need meaning to work, okay? Give them some good pay and good meaning, and they'll work for you. My business advice to you. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Hmm. That's the pace you're going to, she said, tapping the crumpled page in front of her. You'll have a fab time, believe me. When my friend was there, she just loved it. There are loads of restaurants and bars around, and she trailed off, realizing Holly probably didn't give a damn about whether she had a good time or not. When did he come in? Holly asked, still in shock. Barbara tapped away on the computer. The booking was made on the 20th, on the 28th of November. November? Holly gasped. Shouldn't even have been out of bed then. Was he on his own? Yes, but there was a taxi waiting outside for him the whole time. What time was this at? Holly asked quickly. I'm sorry, but I can't really remember. It was quite a long time ago. Yes, of course. I'm sorry. Holly interrupted. Barbara completely understood. If that was her husband, well, if she ever met someone worthy of ever becoming her husband, she would also want to know every single detail. Barbara told her as much as she could remember until Holly could think of no more questions to ask. Okay, thank you, Barbara. Thank you so much. Holly reached over to the computer and gave her a big hug. No problem at all. Barbara hugged her back, feeling satisfied with her good deed for the day. Come back and let us know how you get on. She smiled. Here's your details. She handed Holly a thick envelope and watched her walk away. She sat, thinking her crappy job might not be so crappy after all. Oh, so good. What on earth was all that about? Melissa was dying to find out. Barbara began to explain the story. Okay, girls, I'm taking my break now. Barbara, no smoking in the staff room. Their boss closed and locked his door and turned to face them. Christ almighty, what are you two crying about now? That's why Holly and Jerry, the perfect couple. Okay, so this was the end of chapter 23. Now we'll be there for chapter 24, maybe tomorrow. Bye bye. Thank you for listening.